Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast, April 19th edition. Brian Neubert will join me shortly. Tom Dienhart will be on in the back segment as we talk a little football portal, lots of football portal action going on and other things and the end of spring football as well. Brian will hit on basketball and all. It's been an extremely busy week, as most Purdue men's basketball fans know. I want to thank the Union Club Hotel, the Boiler Up Bar, but it's a new property, the Boiler House Prime restaurant at the Pete Dye Clubhouse. About a week, been open now about 8 or 9 days there, and folks I've talked to have had a good experience. I was fortunate to have a good experience there last week. It is a beautiful new restaurant, and the food is excellent. I can attest to that. A good spot to enjoy, and we'll hit on that too. And we'll look forward to maybe a summer evening or two out there. This would be a perfect place for. I'm going to bring Brian Neubert in, and we'll talk and hit this as we look forward to talking some basketball. All right, Brian. Nothing going on this week, as we always say, but obviously a momentous week, it seems, for Purdue. Matt Painter and company getting commitments from Omer Meyer and also, of course, Liam Murphy, too. Put that a little bit into perspective. I mean, obviously, that roster is taking good shape. It looks like it's completely set for 25-26, but just that the relevance of Purdue seems to have all the pieces it needs to make every bit of a big run in 25-26.
Yeah, I think broadly, when you look at the pluses and the minuses of the transaction cycle,
Yeah,
I think that Purdue upgraded considerably. I think they lost some athleticism. They lost two good players in Miles Coleman and Camden Heide, and but the pluses to the minuses turned weaknesses into strengths. I
yeah,
think Purdue goes from being prohibitively small this past season to being ultimately big again with the combination of Oscar Clough and then Daniel Jacobson coming back from injury.
right.
Purdue's biggest albatross. And here we are besmirching the good name of
I
the
know you're
albatross
doing it
again,
again. I
just
wish you wouldn't.
because some colonial many years ago, many lifetimes ago, was having a bad
Put one
day
around
and
his neck.
decided to associate that poor bird with things that hold us back. Well,
Yeah,
Purdue's size or lack thereof was Purdue's biggest hurdle all season long. Rebounding, protecting the rim, um, the lack of depth that showed itself when Trey Kaufman got in foul trouble in games turned on their sides. All that stuff's off the table now because Purdue's big again, and Purdue is good at being big. That's one thing time has shown over and over again. So Purdue has lost some athleticism, but it has gained where it needed to gain. Omer Meyer gives you your true second ball handler, a viable backup conceivably to Braden Smith, who can play 40 minutes a game, but ideally wouldn't have to. I think he's a guy who can play with Braden Smith. And I say all this not taking anything away from CJ Cox and Jakari Harris, who are both very good
yeah,
players. But I think what this season kind of underscored with those two guys is they're not necessarily true point guards. They're not that true primary ball handler that you'd like to have more than one of. And that was a bigger issue in November and December than it was the rest of the season. But at the same time, the rest of the season, I don't know if Purdue ever played teams like the teams they struggled with in non-conference play. So now, if you need to take Braden Smith out of the game, you have another point guard, another true point guard. If you need a situation where you need 2 point guards on the floor and a third ball handler, which could be a CJ Cox or a Jakari Harris or a Fletcher Lawyer, you're all set. And I think that's a huge advantage for a coaching staff in a sport that is moving toward having multiple ball handlers on the floor at all times. I think Purdue is now rich in ball handlers, whereas last year maybe it was a little bit there was a little bit of a deficit there that maybe didn't show up all season, but it did early in the season, and it's
right.
part of the reason that Miles Colvin was never able to separate from two freshman guards, and it was part of the reason, Camden Heide ended up moving to the 4, where that was his best position. And I just think the trade-off of Colvin's and Heidi's athleticism for Oscar Clough's size, Omer Meyer's ball handling and ball screen comfort, plus Liam Murphy's floor spacing at the 4, that's a net gain overall. You hated to see Miles Colvin and Camden Heide go, but I think Purdue's a better, more complete team right now than they were at the end of this season.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you've had a chance to delve into Liam Murphy, and you've obviously watched Omer Meyer. We also had a good interview with him just to get a kind of a feel for what he's all about. But just talk specifically about those guys because there's some interesting connections that got that job done for Purdue, but also just what you might see because one of the things that's interesting is Trey Kaufman Wren. It gives you a lot of flexibility. I'm talking about Murphy really more than anything else. Looks like a guy that can shoot the basketball well. Comes from disciplined background. I'm making an assumption that Columbia was that type of program. But talk about let's first talk about Murphy in terms of how that might work with the dynamic of a roster that is he's got a lot of options with in the front court, and yet Murphy doesn't appear to be a guy that you're going to need to might play 6 minutes a game, might play 15 minutes a game. I mean, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I don't make any mistake here that Purdue is still going to play Trey Kaufman as much as he can play. Yeah. We're assuming he's moving back to the 4. I don't even think that's assumption. I think that's guaranteed because you have 5s now. You have centers now. You didn't necessarily have that almost the entire season last year, or this past season, I should say. So you're still riding Trey Kaufman, but he can't play 40 minutes a game. I mean, the issues with foul trouble periodically, plus the fact that he's mortal and he's a really physical player, and having him out there 30 minutes a game versus 35, 36, 37, you probably get a better 30 minutes out of Trey Kaufman than you would a 37 minutes. So you want to give him opportunities to be out of the game. In which case somebody's got to fill that power forward spot. And Liam Murphy, I can't say I'm an expert on Liam Murphy, but I know he's a good catch and shoot guy. And in Purdue's offense, they know how to get 4-man threes. Braden Smith knows how to get 4-man threes. And, to be honest with you, had Camden Heide shot the way he did at the end of the season, all season long, things would have looked very different. Would have looked very different on paper. Liam Murphy is going to get open shots with Purdue. Trey Kaufman is going to draw so much attention. Braden Smith's going to draw so much attention. Fletcher Lawyer is going to draw so much attention that backside guy in ball screen offense is going to get open looks. He's going to get looks from 3. He's going to get opportunities to play off shot fakes. And really all you need from that position is a handful of good minutes a game. If he's efficient on low volume 3-point opportunities, awesome. If he gives you some energy, if he holds up his own as a rebounder, which isn't nearly as urgent a need now as it was
no doubt
this past season, but still always a need, great. But the fact that this is a guy who probably could have gone somewhere and found 15 shots a game and instead came to a place that can't promise him 15 minutes is, speaks to the fact that he wants to be part of something bigger than himself. He wants to win, and he wants to play at the highest level possible, which those highly motivated guys in their last year are pretty attractive. You asked, too, about Omer Meyer, right?
Yes, I did.
Well, as I mentioned before, you now have a viable backup point guard. And as importantly, long-term, you have Braden Smith's successor now. You don't have that urgency to go out and find a guy to step right in for Braden Smith after this season. You have a guy to naturally move into that role who has a lot of what Braden Smith has. The natural point guard instincts and savvy that Braden Smith has are special. They are very, very rare. But what you see in Omer Meyer is a little bit of that. He's got a natural comfort in the sort of offense Purdue runs with Braden Smith. He knows how to use ball screens. He can make pull-up jumpers off ball screens. He's a great facilitator. He's a great passer. He's bigger than Braden Smith. He's not the same player by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very different player, but he's got a lot of those same point guard instincts and things like that. He's also got the body to play off the ball. You can move him to the 2. You can move him to the 3. I don't know quite how good a catch and shoot guy he is to be able to play the 2 or 3. And I don't know where the minutes come from to do that, because you've got other guys at those positions, but there's always versatility involved with point guards who are big. And if they can make catch and shoot shots, you can do a lot of different things with them. So the opportunity, to potentially have 2 real point guards on the floor at the same time, plus maybe an extra half point guard, a 1.5, if you will, a CJ Cox or a Jakari Harris or a Fletcher Lawyer, who, obviously can handle the ball as well. That's a big deal. Now, what you don't really have in this backcourt is don't have, other than Braden Smith, you maybe don't necessarily have that horsepower. You remember the athleticism that Lance Jones gave them 2 years ago was really that final piece of the puzzle. I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you have that athleticism or that burst on this roster anywhere other than Braden Smith. But you've got a lot of good players and you've got a lot of skill, and you just have a really good team top to bottom, provided the 2 sophomore guards are, make that year 1 to year 2 jump. Daniel Jacobson's healthy. These newcomers come in and acclimate themselves well and things like that. This is all on paper right now, but
sure,
it's all we have to go on. But it sure looks really good on paper.
All right, we want to talk about, and we kind of hit on some of these challenges with this roster. I mean, you've used the term before. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but embarrassment of riches. This is a talented roster. This is a roster that, on paper, as you very clearly pointed out, has the ability to be a 3-weekend team and then some in the NCAA tournament next year. But what are some of the you see? You've got 3 established guys that know. And you really have more than that. I mean, you've obviously got Harris and Cox have certainly established themselves as big time guys that belong at this level. But if you're looking at that in terms of are there pitfalls with having a couple new guys that, Purdue has had a great culture. We assume these guys are good culture guys. They seem that way, at least from what we've seen. But what do you see as a challenge? Is it just going to be making sure you orchestrate this correctly? Obviously, every season has challenges if you have injuries, but is it how fast Jacobson comes along, how Clough and Jacobson play, how they do that? What do you see, at least looking at this from an April 19th perspective, of what will be some of the challenges it'll face there? Well, it'll be just the fact that everybody thinks they're going to the Final Four, everybody being Purdue fans.
Yeah, I probably come off like a jerk sometimes because I try to be as realistic as things as possible.
Yeah.
About things as possible. But I mean, it looks great on paper, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, you still need 3 brand new guys to come in here and be good. And you still need Daniel Jacobson with, 1.001 games of college experience under his belt to be good. You still need everybody to stay healthy. You still need Traycoff Moran and to be able to play next to size, which we didn't really get we didn't get a great look at last year because Daniel Jacobson got hurt in 2 minutes into game 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Purdue has to build on its best days of this past season defensively. The big guys have to play big. There have to be advantages when you're playing big. You have to be really good on the glass. You have to be good at defending the rim. And Oscar Clough has not played a game at Purdue. It's a very different level at South Dakota State than it is at Purdue. Rebounding normally translates, but between Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson, you have 2 guys who have played 25 minutes in a Purdue uniform, or however many Daniel Jacobson played last year before he broke his leg. So there are unknowns here. Jack Benner is probably going to be in your rotation. He's never played a college game. Jakari Harris and CJ Cox are ostensibly juniors now. They've played so much, but they still have to. There's still room to get better. Purdue's ball pressure defensively has to go from being inconsistent this year to being very good this coming season, and that's up to Jakari Harris and CJ Cox more than anybody else. And that's something Purdue needs every single game. As I said before, Purdue's not the most athletic team in the world. We will see if they're the most physically dominant. Purdue is big, but they're not Saturday big. They aren't going to roll out there every game and just trample people. It's more a matter of going from a deficiency to a strength, not a dominant strength, but a strength nonetheless. This isn't a team that's going to go out there and just roll the ball out there and just crush people physically the way they could with Zach Edey and playing big with Trey Coppen next to him and Mason Gillis coming off the bench. So I think things look great on paper, but I think a lot of this stuff has to become reality, before everybody starts proclaiming Purdue the national champions. You see a lot of teams win off-season national championships every year.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
And, Purdue is the ultimate kind of prove-it program. I don't think they're going to sit here in the offseason and say, we've got this, and this on paper. It's going to be all about improving this summer and, playing a tough non-conference schedule again in order to build up the Big Ten play, get all your ducks in a row before conference play, and then ultimately go into the NCAA tournament. But I don't see any reason why this team can't be one of those Matt Painter teams that really benefits from a really good non-conference schedule, gets better by the end of the Big Ten season. They have depth now to not have to worry about what you're going to look like in February, presumably. Again, a lot of unknowns here, and then potentially the opportunity and the leadership to really peak in March. It's something you don't see in college basketball anymore nowadays. Purdue's got the best senior class in college basketball, and I'm saying that not knowing what anyone else has. I'm only saying that because who could possibly have a
seasoned senior class? Yeah.
Who could have a better senior class than Purdue? Braden Smith, Trey Coppen, Fletcher Lawyer, Oscar Clough, and Liam Murphy. That's a hell of a senior class. That's a lot of college basketball played. That's a lot of college basketball played together with your three best players, having played, I don't know how many games it is now together. 200 games together, those three guys.
Yeah.
Something like that. And it's just, you don't see it anymore. And it has to be a huge advantage for Purdue this year. But that they also have to have that kind of approach to things that team last year had, where that team was just mad all year.
Yeah.
And they had good reason to be mad. That they endured, a pretty embarrassing kind of fate. This team, has known nothing but winning since that day. And, Matt Painter talks all the time about being on edge. It's going to be up to these seniors to keep this whole team, angst ridden, as I like to say, and motivated to be their very best every single time out. I like to put it this way. Like, I don't know if this makes sense to people, but Purdue's standard next season needs to not be Michigan State or Wisconsin or Illinois or Indiana or the teams they play in non-conference. Purdue's standard needs to be the very best Purdue can possibly be, because if Purdue is the best it can be, nobody's beating them, at least during the regular season. When you get into the NCAA tournament, you obviously get to a certain level, ideally, where you run into teams that their best can be better than your best, which is what happened to Purdue in the national title game last year. But if Purdue's as good as Purdue can be, I don't know how many teams' bests are going to be able to beat Purdue's best.
Well, Purdue, obviously too this year. I mean, a couple of things. They didn't win the Big Ten, and I'm sure that will be some level of motivation. And you look at the way the Houston game ended, some level of controversy there. At least it was a disappointing finish. You didn't get the call you needed at the right time. I understand that wasn't the whole game there, but my guess, Braden Smith may be a kind of guy that can, and that group will take a little bit that as edge going forward. We'll see. What about if you were going to put, and this is probably a stupid question for the 19th of April, but biggest what's the key to that next level for this group? Is it Jakari Harris? I mean, I keep going to those guys because you've talked about their Cox and Harris, their defensive abilities, their ability to do things that Purdue really does need. It needs to prove it can play at a high level defensively, and maybe Jacobson and Clough will bring that to rim protection, or at least certainly Jacobson could. But what would you view as your wild cards to to guys that need to be maybe better than advertised to take Purdue to the next level? Is it those two? Is it is it Smith and TKR and Lawyer having another all Big Ten type season? What do you view?
Well, your old guys need to be consistent and they need to play like veterans, but you need energy. I talk a lot about energy. When you look at last year's team that went to the Final Four, Lance Jones was I'm trying to think of
Energizer Bunny. No, I don't
know.
No,
I
you wouldn't do that.
I was thinking along the lines of narcotics. I probably ought to choose my words better, but
you're usually good at that. But go ahead.
He was a shot in the arm for Purdue. I mean,
there you go.
He transformed that team with his energy. You look at some of the things Mason Gillis gave some of Purdue's best teams. You look at some of the things Caleb First gave Purdue's team last year.
Yeah.
In terms of his hustle, his offensive rebounding at times, things like that. Wasn't a perfect player, but he gave Purdue a spark at times. And I think that's kind of where C.J. Cox and Jakari Harris come in next year. I think that there's a real lane for those guys to be kind of that game-changing spark sort of player. I'm not necessarily painting those guys into a corner. This can come from anybody. It can come from Liam Murphy for all I know. I don't know anything about the kid. But I think those guys who provide enough energy to take a team from one level to another, especially on those, Tuesday night games at Iowa, those games, every team is going to phone one in every now and then. And that's been something Purdue's been really good at not doing. But it's kind of bound to happen before long. But when you have those guys who show up every single night and they change games with their hustle, with their joy, with their energy, with their whatever, that's such a huge deal. And I think that's something Purdue is going to have to make sure they have, in part to counteract just the length of the season, the grind of it all, the fact all these guys have played a ton of college basketball now, and there are some things that are probably not novel anymore, and sometimes it's the novelty that keeps you hooked up. You just don't want to get complacent, and you just don't want to be number 1 or 2 or 3 in the country and just take anything for granted. And when you have those guys who just do stuff like what Lance Jones did a couple years ago, Mason Gillis, again, to a lesser extent, Caleb First last year, that is so important on teams like this. And I just think that's a big picture thing to look out for.
Yeah, well said. You've written and talked about how, I don't know if they worded it this way, Matt Painter 4.0, but just the fact that he's made, is this now safe to say that he is, now I understand the rules could change a little bit with the House settlement and how things will play out differently and the difference this year, but with the respect to the unloading of the Brinks truck here before June, or actually before the settlement comes to pass. But my point is this now clear sign to you that Purdue's fully into this new world of college basketball? Matt Painter and staff know how to do a lot of things, but is this your sure sign that all is well? And this program knows how to play this game because they went and got, yes, they had contacts to get some of these guys, but they certainly got it done and moved, as Matt Painter said, I think after the loss to Houston, we're going to be aggressive. He was just that. How do you take that?
Yeah, well, I mean, he obviously is perpetually in win now mode, and I think
which everybody has to be. Yeah.
It was painfully clear to everybody last year that there were gaping holes on that team that needed to be filled for this team that was capable of doing pretty much anything and everything this coming year. And the urgency they showed in filling those holes was necessary. And, I don't think there's a more adaptable coach in college basketball than Matt Painter. I just don't even think it's close. I think instead of complaining about everything that's changed about college basketball, he's taken everything for what it is. He's viewed the world as it is and not what he wants it to be or what he thinks it should be. He's just adapted over and over again. He's adapted. He's turned this from a defensive program into an offensive program. He has figured out a way to get his players keep his players and win with his players when, his players might not necessarily be the blueprint for a lot of places that have won at the same levels Purdue has won. And now that this is quasi-professional sports, he has adapted to that too, and has done it swimmingly, shall we say. I mean, I don't think, obviously we'll see what Oscar Clough, Omer Meyer, not Oscar. I almost said Oscar Meyer.
I
Omer
know.
Meyer
I've already done that twice.
and Liam Murphy end up doing at Purdue, but on paper, you did as well as you can do. And I think, Purdue making that $20.5 million revenue sharing commitment's a big deal, a really big deal. I think, Purdue's probably, its donor base has probably been activated here by the Final Four and, some other things. And don't make any mistakes here. People are out there on Twitter speculating Purdue's got a $15 million roster. That is not even close. That is hilariously wrong. It is probably half that. But they have made the most of this, and they have acclimated to it, perfectly thus far. We'll see what ultimately ends up coming from it this year and in the long term. But I think that, Purdue has adapted to everything that's come their way here the last couple of years. What you have to keep in mind, I think this is really important context to what Purdue's done here the last 5 years. Purdue is a program built on continuity, is built to get old and stay old. It is built to keep guys in their program, to develop them, to redshirt them, to keep them, and to be old. And the COVID year and the transfer portal have allowed everyone to skip to the front of the line there, and it has dulled Purdue's advantages. The money part of it has, not hurt Purdue all that much because the guys who are motivated by the money, that helps Purdue to weed those guys out. And it boils things down to more Purdue-oriented kids. It has helped Purdue keep their best players in school for sure. Saturday doesn't come back for a senior year without NIL. Braden Smith, who knows? He might be off the NBA right now if he's not a millionaire right now. So the money piece of it, contrary to what any of us would have expected, has helped Purdue. And all of this stuff in terms of teams getting older without having to earn it, and people being legally able to go out there and buy players, that stuff theoretically, any of us would have thought, hey, that's going to hurt Purdue. That stuff has all helped Purdue, and their greatest success in, I don't know, you know better than me, but their best run in program history, right, the last 5 years,
hard to beat. Yep,
never has come
and
in
really
the backdrop. Has come with the backdrop of all this stuff that could very easily have been crippling for Purdue. Instead, they completely weaponized it in their favor, and you have to give people aren't going to view it like that outside of those of us paying really close attention. But that is a really big story, and I don't think Matt Painter gets credit for that beyond this silly little irrelevant podcast of ours here. But it's a big deal, man.
I take offense to being called irrelevant, but that's all right. You can do it anytime you want. I guess that's all right. But no, you have. Yeah, it is the greatest.
I'm irrelevant. You're the king of West Lafayette, if not Tippecanoe County.
There you go.
As a whole.
I wish. All right, but yeah, and to be clear from a historical perspective, absolutely the best run in the modern era of. Yeah, you can go back and talk about Ward Piggy Lambert, but that was a long time ago. All right, last question I have for you is just on the schedule. It's been, obviously the announcement of Alabama this week, I believe it was earlier this week. Purdue will play Auburn and Indianapolis. We don't know exactly how those teams are going to look. We know they'll be talented, certainly. And then, of course, I think it's Iowa State, also another game the Boilermakers will have on its schedule. Don't know the Bahamas teams yet. I think you wrote about that you're, and again, it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen there. But again, we'll play into a schedule that you want to play a good schedule if you're Purdue and play really good teams. And it seems to be they at least are going to have 3 or 4 of them at least in non-conference. I'm sure they'll have an exhibition game that will be challenging as well.
Yeah, I mean it's another one of these schedules that are built to make you better at the risk of losing games. Now, last year Purdue lost games for the first time in years in non-conference play. They're exposing themselves again to that possibility here. Going to Alabama to finish out that home and home series. Marquette and Iowa State both come to Mackey Arena, and then you play Auburn on a semi-neutral court in Indy. That semi-neutral court didn't do Purdue favors against Texas A&M. So taking that for granted is a fool's endeavor. Don't know about the Bahamas yet. It's a really weird time for MTEs because this Vegas tournament has really disrupted everything. People are going for the NIL payouts until those things all inevitably go bankrupt. So people are erring toward going to Vegas instead of going to the traditional MTE.
MTEs,
Coaches nowadays don't want to play 3 games anymore, so that's really hurting like Atlantis and how long Maui is going to be a 3-game deal. I don't know, but you look at a lot of these events, Bahamas is going to be a 2-game deal the way San Diego was this past year. But you just remember how San Diego went for Purdue. That was supposed to be Purdue, BYU, Notre Dame, and Arkansas. Calipari gets the Arkansas job, decides he doesn't want to do an MTE, so they bail. Notre Dame bails to go to Vegas to get that NIL money. Can't blame them. That's kind of the game now. And Purdue ends up playing NC State, which you probably would rather have not put on your resume last season. You get a good game against Ole Miss, but thankfully for Purdue, they were able to get Ole Miss. Had they not been able to get Ole Miss, you would have gotten another meh game there. You don't want that. You sign up for these preseason tournaments to beef up your schedule, not to play a couple of rummies. Again, I don't know if rummy is offensive, so
no, it's not. I think it's
if
good.
you have a substance
I'm
problem out
looking at
there,
gin
I
rummy. It's
apologize
good.
if you took offense. Riffraff, perhaps, is the better word.
Yeah, and of course Mississippi didn't Mississippi beat BYU? Ended up having a great year, obviously this year too. So,
yeah, but had they not gotten them at the last second, who knows who would have been there? It would have
right,
been somebody who
a rummy.
a rummy. It would have been just a line on the resume and not a team that moves the needle for you when you beat them.
Okay, that was not my last question. This is my last question. So the importance too of the way this is all shaking out, and looking at the crystal ball of how great, and it was the SEC certainly had won the national championship, had 2 teams in the Final Four, and how many more in the Elite Eight. But the fact that you're going to have to again put that measuring stick out against maybe the conference that's going to bring 4 or 5 teams into that Elite Eight type level of play this year, that has to be important. I mean, you're going to play 2 of the better ones. One would think on paper, at least with Auburn and Alabama in this, and who knows, maybe you'll find another one in the Bahamas. I don't know, but what do you make of that?
Well, it's also about testing your team against different styles of play. Like,
Right.
is there any better team in America right now to test your defense than Alabama? Is there any better team in college basketball right now to test your offense against than Auburn? Is there any more?
This is visited by Stu
You
Coleman on the
have
podcast there.
like
So
a ghost behind you.
he just brought my laundry up, which was awfully nice of him to do that. But go ahead, Stu Coleman of
I thought
Coleman
our
Publishing.
podcast was haunted there for a second. I was
Yeah.
going to run.
And he could probably do the last 10 minutes of this. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. And
Think of
Stu
the level.
definitely didn't mean.
Think of the
Go ahead.
athleticism too. You play with Alabama and Auburn,
Yeah.
and you play those teams, and then in the NCAA tournament, you run into Houston or somebody like that, and you've seen it all before. And
Yeah.
that's what this is all about. It's different styles of play. It's a higher level of athlete. It's the way Purdue schedules. Things don't get harder in Big Ten play. That doesn't stop them from losing that first road game every year in December, but
Yeah.
things don't get harder. And the way this was for generations was things change in Big Ten play. Now the
Right.
officiating sucks in the Big Ten, so that changes. But in terms of the caliber of team you're playing and the quality of team you're playing and the level of athlete you're playing, it's not like you're going from 0 to 60 in a month. You're going I've completely lost control of this
no, but
analogy.
zero to six. Yeah, you've got time
It used to
to
be where life hit you fast.
yeah.
What was that old
Ferris
commercial?
Bueller.
Life comes at you fast.
That's
That's the way
Ferris
it used to
Bueller, but
be.
yeah,
As
yeah,
soon as it hit Christmas,
right.
stuff got real, and a lot of teams got exposed. And Purdue is easing right into it. And that doesn't mean they're not going to lose games this year. The schedule, we don't know the schedule, the Big Ten schedule yet. That is going to determine championships.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah, more than ever.
fortunately slash unfortunately for Purdue, they're now going to be a top 5 team in the country. So here comes all the primetime TV placement that's going to get you playing every 3 days for a month, which cost Purdue a Big Ten championship this year, in my opinion. I think playing Ohio State after coming back from the West Coast because TV needed you on 3 days rest or whatever it was, cost you the Ohio State game. And after that, they backloaded your schedule so that all your best games were in prime viewing slots. So your hardest games all came at the very end. And had you spread things out better and had TV not just dictate it and put you through this grinder, Purdue would have won the Big Ten. Now, that said, they could have beaten Ohio State. They had that game won. They could have won at Michigan. They had that game won. They could have closed out Illinois at Illinois. I can't say they had that game won, but they were in a great
No, but
position.
they had a position to win.
So I'm not sitting here saying Purdue got robbed. I'm saying that the schedule, as determined by TV, is a blessing and a curse because they want you because you're good, but they exploit you because you're good too, and that's going to be a hurdle for Purdue again this year. We don't know. I don't know who the double plays are this year. That is going to matter big time every single year because when you play 18 or when you play 20 games, the team that gets the 3 worst teams twice is going to have a huge advantage, and it's just
And Purdue's going to have Indiana every year twice, so we know
Purdue's going to
yeah.
that, and so you go to Bloomington every year. That's never easy. Even if Purdue is head and shoulders better than IU, which it has been before, that is never easy. Nor is it easy for Indiana coming to Mackey Arena every year too.
Yeah.
So it does go both ways.
Works both ways.
So if Indiana gets back to where Indiana wants to be, it's an issue for them too. But in the meantime, if Purdue can get Minnesota twice, awesome. If Purdue can get Northwestern twice, awesome. If Purdue can get Rutgers twice, awesome, which they did this past year, but they also got Michigan twice, and they also got
Indiana twice.
Indiana twice, yeah. So Purdue, if Purdue can get a bad team as one of their double plays, and you're not getting the West Coast teams twice.
That's right.
So it's going to have to be one of these traditional footprint teams. I'm not saying you necessarily want the easy way to a Big Ten championship. You want to earn it. You want to beat the best to be the best. To use cliches that people throw at us. But it certainly makes it easier, and it certainly makes preseason predictions easier when you know who has a more favorable path to a Big Ten title and who has the hardest path to a Big Ten title. This is the Big Ten now, and that's why I said 2 years ago, Purdue won the last truly legitimate Big Ten championship in the regular season because this West Coast nonsense is warping everything. The schedule is too out of whack to reflect reality. The best team's not going to win every year. Purdue might be the head and shoulders best team in the Big Ten this upcoming season, and it might get the worst schedule, and it might not win the Big Ten. I do think Purdue. I'm going to die on this hill. I still think Purdue was the best team in the Big Ten this year. They didn't play like it all the time, but I still think Purdue had the best players. I still think Purdue had a lot of things. Michigan State had one of those typical Michigan State seasons where they just rally and they play over their heads. And they ended up going farther in the NCAA tournament than Purdue did. So it's hard for me to say that a team that won the league by multiple games over Purdue and got farther in the NCAA tournament than Purdue wasn't better than Purdue. But I don't think it was markedly different. I think the two of them were very close together, but it very easily could have been a situation where Purdue wins the league by a game or a half a game over Michigan State. But I do think Purdue was just as good, if not better, than Michigan State and the other teams that were in contention. They just had some things. They had a defensive identity crisis the back half of the season. I think that their size, I think Daniel Jacobson's injury mattered more than any of us thought it would have when it happened. And it was just kind of one of those years where things just didn't go your way. And ultimately, this coming season is going to have to be one of those seasons where things go your way. It takes a lot of luck. It takes a lot of health. It takes a lot of things to fall into place. But on paper right now, it looks like, Purdue has a lot of pieces of the puzzle in place here.
Well said. Purdue will be out in L.A. You'll be out in L.A. next year. UCLA and USC will be the road trip next year for Purdue. Of course, Oregon and Washington will come to West Lafayette. That we do know, and at least in the schedule. And of course, Indiana will be a double play. We know that. So, Brian, thanks so much. Always great analysis. Make sure that you check out Brian's work on goldenblack.com. There'll be more to come. And also, obviously, Brian spent last week in Hamilton, Ohio, covering some basketball, some summer basketball, or should I say AAU basketball. A lot of that stuff, that's what separates Brian from just about everybody else in the internet world. He actually knows what he's talking about, so that's a good thing. All right, we will be. Well, is that a qualifier?
Let's not be mean here. There are lots of good people out there saying stuff, but let's not generalize. The clowns out there who people listen to with people who know what they're talking about. I don't want to make it sound like it's just a complete idiocracy out there.
I understand.
There are some, but there are also a lot of good people doing a lot of good work out there too. And
all right, that's reasonable clarification and certainly true. All right, we'll be back and our next segment. Tom Dienhart will join us, and we will talk some spring football portal talk, but also the end of spring practice. A little bit hard to figure out exactly what happened, but we're trying to make some sense out of ever-changing roster for Barry Odom and company. So we'll be back. Next thing you'll see will be Tom Dienhart and I talking about Purdue football and more. Brian, thanks again.
No problem.
Tom Dienhart joins us. And Saturday Simulcast. I'm Alan Karpick, and we're looking forward to this. I don't know when the quiet will exist in college football world for you and for all that, but a lot of activity this week, obviously, for Coach Barry Odom and the staff. Several portal additions, several visitors. Seems to me, looking at they've achieved some of the. We talked last week about the need for offensive linemen. Some have come in. What's your assessment as you watch the literally the waiver wires, it seems, come back and forward?
Yeah, they're doing exactly what we thought, Alan. First of all, we've seen a lot of guys leave Purdue. The roster is getting, I guess, combed over and shaken out, and they've had a lot of conversations with players, and anybody who follows this site or our social media can see the attrition that they've had so far. I think I tabulated it on Boiling Over and on the board. I think there's close to 20 guys that have left the program that we know about. Some others I'm sure have left, but maybe they're not going to go in the portal, so they haven't said anything publicly. So long story short, a lot of attrition, and that was going to happen and has to happen because we know Barry Odom wants to infuse some more talent, upgrade this roster via the portal, and he started to make some headway there, Alan. You referenced some commitments. They've already got, 3 commitments out of the portal. We saw, a couple weeks ago, they got their first one, probably their best one so far, and the linebacker from Tennessee State, Sanders Ellis. And then they got the defensive lineman from Akron, Bowling Green, Marcus Moore. And then last night they got a gigantic offensive lineman, Jude McCoskey. Terre Haute kid, played the last 2 years for Indiana State, and he actually went in the portal in December and committed to Tulane. He never even got his bags unpacked in New Orleans, and he's going to stay in state and come to Purdue. So 6'8", 300 pounds, Alan. I'm glad I don't have to feed that kid.
Yeah.
Those are your three. Those are your 3 commitments, and they've had other guys, that have visited or are visiting, and I think they feel pretty good about Alan that they may end up getting commitments from. Another offensive lineman from Auburn, Braden Joyner, who was an all-SEC freshman player, really good player. And a wide receiver from Tulsa, who's a Brownsburg, Indiana native, Corey Smith. I think they feel good about maybe getting him. And then an offensive tackle from Arkansas State, Ian Jeffries. I think they feel pretty good about getting him, Alan. So I think we could see some more commitments maybe in coming days. We expect that. But I'm burying the lead, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the biggest visitor of all is Ryan Brown, who got here.
Yeah, amazing.
Got here on Thursday, landed in Indy about 3. And yeah, Ryan Brown, number 15, who left for North Carolina in December. And now he's contemplating a return to West Lafayette. Now, you just can't keep people away from West Lafayette, Indiana.
Yeah, apparently. Well, it's amazing too, because there's all the talk about Bill Belichick and the supposed, and we never know on the money side, the supposed large NIL opportunity for Ryan Brown for Belichick in Chapel Hill. But something changed, and it does. And they've already been through spring practice, I presume, at Carolina. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. What do you, and again, this is almost an impossible question, but I know you've written extensively about Purdue's need for a quarterback, because it's not, and they've had one already leave in the portal, one current quarterback, a former current quarterback. My point is he the guy, do you think, or who the heck knows whether Ryan Brown will be that if he commits to Purdue? Will they still go out and get somebody else, do you think?
First of all, he went to North Carolina. Great opportunity. I mean, you get a chance to work under Bill Belichick. I mean, my goodness.
Hard to beat that, yeah.
I don't know all the details around his departure. Publicly, we know North Carolina is wooing another portal quarterback. The South Alabama quarterback is supposedly going to go to North Carolina. Maybe that's already happened. Maybe that was a factor, Alan. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But long story short, Ryan felt it was in his best interest, obviously, to look around. And, he went in the portal. I think it was just on Wednesday. And then bang, next day, he was coming to Purdue. And you know what, Alan? You make some good points. I've been sort of beating the drum where I think they needed to get a quarterback out of the portal, and here they are. It looks like they're pursuing one. Obviously, E.J. Colson's the quarterback who left Purdue already, who got here from Central Florida in December, and I think if Ryan wants to commit, they're going to take him, and I think I think he's going to be their guy, Alan.
Yeah,
I think all the chips over the Kozic football complex, all the chips are on Ryan Brown. He's the guy as long as the visit goes well and he meshes well with the new staff. I think he's a great fit for what Barry Odom wants to do schematically on offense. He's a 6'4", 215-pound strong guy who can run the football. Remember the Illinois game last year?
Oh yeah,
he had over 100 yards rushing, almost 300 passing. That's Ryan Brown, and we know they want to run the quarterback in this offense. He's big enough where he can do it, take some hits. And, I think he's a good enough passer, can continue to get better as a passer. And, maybe more importantly is man, I tell you what, he's got an infectious personality. And I was amazed how beloved he was by his teammates last year. And I think he's a guy that could be the real face of this offense, the kind of guy that Barry Odom could fall in love with.
Obviously Hudson Card was the starter last year, and then the injury in the second half against Illinois. That was by far the most productive, maybe the most productive half.
It was.
You can argue in the Walters era, certainly the most productive half in 2024. And you mentioned that last year. I can remember that week leading into that game that you just talked about. Nothing against Hudson Card. They're just different. They were different personalities, but this guy. You said you were doing the interviews. I remember that they were patting him on the back coming through, and you could just tell it was an honest portrayal. And there's so much to that. I mean, you've got to have a guy, whether it's Ryan Brown or not, we'll find out. But you got to, if you're Barry Odom, it's stating the obvious in college football. Look what happened to Notre Dame this year. They lost their guy. You need the absolute stability of that position, whether the guy's the most uber talented guy or has put up all these numbers. You got to have somebody you can trust. And it seems to me that's a big factor there.
Yeah. He's for a backup quarterback to have that type of an impact on the locker room, and I think a lot of those players were very excited to see Ryan get his chance. And like you said, he started at Illinois. That was a 50-49 overtime loss. Then you also quarterback Purdue against the Oregon Ducks right over in Ross-Ade Stadium too. So you had the 2 starts. That's the thing, Alan. We kept saying Purdue needs an experienced quarterback. Well, Ryan Brown really isn't that experienced, obviously, right?
No, he isn't. He didn't play because he only played half of the Northwestern game with Meredith the year before, and played better than Meredith.
He did. I remember late in the game they were kind of alternating series, and he got back-to-back series late in that game when the game was on the line. They put the ball in his hands. So yeah, he doesn't have a long resume as far as starts go. But it's kind of hard to get those kind of quarterbacks at this stage in the portal too, Alan. The market's pretty picked over in the April window, and there's a lot of competition for guys down. Everybody's kind of shopping and desperate to fill needs,
right? And
things get overvalued in that April portal window, and that's where we're at right now. So, I'm not saying Ryan Brown is a consolation prize. I think he'd be a nice get for a lot of reasons, and that we've talked about schematically, skill set wise, personality wise. His personality, I think, will mesh well with the way Barry Odom wants to run this program. He could easily be the face of everything in terms of his leadership, his toughness, his passion, his energy, and his work ethic. So a lot of intangibles there, too, with Ryan Brown. So if I were to guess, he probably will commit. We'll see. Then I think, Alan, the fallout from that decision, if it does happen, the fallout, again, we've seen E.J. Colson leave. Will any of the other current quarterbacks leave based on Ryan Brown's maybe anticipated departure? Malachi Singleton, Evans Chuba, Bennett Meredith being the 3 to watch. So that's going to be fascinating to see if one of those guys say, hey, man, I'm out of here. And again, that's something for everybody to keep on the radar if Ryan Brown commits, obviously.
Do you get the sense in that quarterback room and all your discussions during spring ball that it's as much a case with Singleton and Chuba down the line that's just experience, and that is as much of it, is getting involved in the system, that these guys could be guys they want down the road, but they're just not ready now? Is that as much of the storyline from your perspective?
I think so. Neither Chuba nor Singleton has ever started a game.
Yeah.
Singleton came off the bench last year at Arkansas and rallied the Hogs to a big win over Tennessee down at Fayetteville. Looked good in doing it, and that's probably his most extensive experience. And Chuba hasn't even taken a snap in college, Alan.
Yeah.
He hasn't even played the last 2 years. He was injured his senior year in high school, then redshirted last year at Washington State. So, yeah, I think they like these guys' talent. I'm just not sure if they're ready for this big of a jump to be a starting quarterback in the Big Ten. I'm sure they'd love to have all these guys back. I feel safe saying that. Will they want to come back and develop? Because Ryan Brown's got 3 years of eligibility, Alan.
Yeah.
Got 3. He's only a redshirt freshman last year, so he's got 3 years left. So those guys have to ask themselves that question. Singleton's a guy. Again, I think they like them all. I think they think Chuba's the most talented, has the most arm talent. Maybe he's the best athlete, a 6'4" guy. Just real raw and still careless with the football, though, at this point. Singleton's very mature, great personality, comes from a good family. My guess would be if they had to start a game today, he would be the guy that got the start. They could trust him. And then there's Bennett Meredith, right?
That's the storyline too.
He could start for you, I think. Older guy.
And how many years of eligibility does he have left?
He's got 2. I'm told he's got 2. So he's a guy you'd love to have come back. He probably had the best spring of all these quarterbacks. He's a guy that's got to ask himself, you know what? My clock's winding down here. Could I find a group of 5 school I can maybe start at, like a MAC school or a Sunbelt school? Or do I want to stay here and see what happens? So he's a guy you'd love to keep. Another good person. And again, had the best spring of anybody. I'm not sure if physically his skill set, athletically, is exactly what they want to do here, So he's somebody, like I said, all these quarterbacks are guys we're going to have to watch, see what their decisions are if Ryan Brown does decide to commit.
Well, and it's interesting because you had to build it from scratch in essence. I mean, not completely. Obviously, Meredith was coming back. And you thought when Odom took the job that Ron was still in the picture. But point is now you at least, if you can keep Singleton, if you can keep Chuba, you've got four 4 to 5 bodies that all of a sudden you have a quarterback room and things can begin to develop. You have to hope, even though this we all talk about how this is a non-development stage or non-development process because of all these kids moving around year in and year out, but somehow you got to find some to stay, and maybe the revenue sharing will help with that.
Yeah,
that you can keep guys in one place and see if they can get better. I mean, become players. And I think that Singleton's a guy that he showed you he could play at a high level against a high level team. Now, is it sustainable? Ryan Brown showed you that last year against an Illinois team that was a bowl team that won its bowl game against South Carolina. So, I mean, it is that we forget about development, and I know it's got to be brutal for coaches just because you got everybody's a free agent at this point every year, but you have to hope that somebody in there is somebody that you can show some spark and develop into a guy that can play. And you never know in quarterback. Well, you did that number last year in Purdue going back to Curtis Painter. There haven't been many years where they've gone start to finish with the same guy. So you're almost guaranteed if you're a quarterback, you're going to get it, and you're the backup, you're going to get a start. I mean, statistically, that's going to happen. So that's just an interesting storyline of how this all develops.
Yeah, you're right. 2016 was the last year they had a quarterback.
David Blau, right? Is that right? Is that what you?
Yeah, David Blau.
Yeah.
2016. God, that's 9 years ago, Alan.
And only one time since, I think Curtis Painter in 2007 was the one before that. So, I mean, it's not happened all that often.
Purdue's also, remember, Purdue's got a quarterback. They got the true freshman quarterback, Garrett Odom's here.
Yeah,
Barry Odom's son. So he's here as a developmental guy as well. And then they got a commitment, remember, a week or two ago from Corn Berry, a 2026 quarterback from Southern California who was committed to Boston College. So he's coming, probably next January. So they got a couple of young guys in the fold as well. So yeah, who knows? We know Garrett Odom's probably sticking around, right?
Yeah.
We know.
He doesn't. He may not need NIL, right? Or he'll be okay in that world.
Quarterback's such a unique spot. We all know only one of them can play. Only one can play at a time. So that creates that sense of urgency. Is my window closing? What should I do? Should I stay here? Should I go? So moms and dads are involved. Trainers are involved. Coaches are trying to sell things.
Agents are involved.
So everybody's tugging on them and telling them what to do. So who knows? We'll have to wait and see. This is the game these coaches have to play every year.
Don't know how they do it. I do not know how they do it, but it's funny. And Barry Odom, I think, certainly from his first press conference in December on, has talked about high school development, and it's interesting because it kind of flies on both sides. I'm not saying he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, but he's been committed. In the last 3 years now, he's going to be north of 40 players in each of the teams. But he's talked to you and others about that need to develop high school players. He's had some success, or certainly has some commitments in the class of 26, and got others, other younger guys that are involved. How did you think he can, and I think he's genuine about wanting to do that, but do you think there's ever going to be a day where he's going to really be able to do that? I believe that they're going to have 20, they think they'll sign 20 guys this year. So there you go.
I think that'll come as the program continues to mature. Right now, he's just things have kind of been ripped down to their studs, if you will.
Yeah.
And he's got to get some ready and physically able bodies that can go now. We can't throw 18-year-olds out there. He can't throw 18-year-olds out there. So you'd think if he, year 3, 4, maybe we'll see some of these high school kids obviously matriculate up and be more factors on the depth chart. I think they got 15 true freshmen coming in this year. I just updated the roster.
Excuse me.
Message board that I pinned to the top. I may post it back on the main page at some point, but I counted 92 guys right now on the roster, and you got to be at 105. So there's obviously room to add guys. But again, I think maybe like 20 guys. I could see 20 guys signing in the 2026 class for Purdue, and yeah, you're right. He said he wants the high school kids to always be his foundation. I think all coaches do. You don't want to be portal dependent or addicted to the portal, if you will, year after year to get over 20 guys. Ideally, you're just kind of filling holes with 5 to 10 guys a year out of the portal, and I think that's probably where Barry Odom wants to get at some point. So, and maybe like this next year though too, Alan. Remember we talked to Barry in December, he talked about his first 2 years at UNLV, and I think he said he brought in over 50 guys each year. So, a lot of these guys are here for 1 year. They're gone because of that. They got 1 year of eligibility out of the portal. So what I'm saying is brace yourself, because we could have the same type of a churn this time next year. Well, we'll have to wait and see, obviously.
Yeah, you hope if you're from a stability standpoint, you can develop some of that, but that may not be possible. One last question on any of Purdue's portal defections this time around. Anybody else that Nick Levy leaving, but anybody that surprised you from that standpoint? I mean, there probably are no surprises anymore, but anything that was a hole that you didn't want to, that you may have to fill, that you didn't want to have to fill.
No.
Yeah.
There's no real surprises. Nobody that was projected to really play a key role has left via the portal right now. So yeah, no, they haven't really had any losses of that ilk, so which is good.
Yeah.
And the portal will be open until April 26th. Remember, I always look at that as like an airplane. Right now, they're boarding people onto the portal airplane. And you got to get on before the door closes on April 26th. Once you're on, if the plane takes off, you can jump off the plane anytime you want. So these guys still have a bit of time to mull this over. I got to think most people, if they're going to do it, have already done it.
Yeah, I would think. And
I think you're going to see most guys probably make their portal decisions here within the first week as well. These things, speed dating, if you will, they tend to happen pretty quickly. I think we're going to see dribs and drabs into May, into June maybe. Purdue's maybe adding a guy or two here or there as we go from late spring into early summer. But by and large, I think they'll probably get most of their commitments here within a week, I would think, out of the portal. And now I put on the board last night some more guys that are going to be visiting here early next week. There's not going to be anybody this weekend because of Easter.
Yeah.
But you can go to the board on the home page. There's some guys that are going to come on Monday to visit Purdue. Some really, I think, very good-looking prospects too, Alan. From my vantage point, the guys they're looking at and the commitments they've got, I have to think for sure they're going to be upgrades.
All right. If you're Barry Odom, that's exactly what you want to have. All right, Tom, thanks so much, and always appreciate your work and insight into all this. Very, very good stuff, and we appreciate that. All right, a programming note. We'll let Mr. Dienhart get on to greener pastures. Happy Easter weekend to you and those of you down the line. But have a great rest of your weekend, Tom.
You too, buddy.
All right, we want to thank Union Club Hotel and Boiler Up Bar, 811 Bistro, and that nice Boiler House Prime, a great place to enjoy a very special meal in a beautiful setting on the Pete Dye Clubhouse, all brought to Purdue by Sam Allen and family, and that's a big deal. And had an opportunity to be there a couple of times. Also, a couple of programming reminders. A reminder: you can we'd love to have you to subscribe to not only our YouTube page. It doesn't cost anything. But even more, we write, that what Tom mentioned, there's a lot of information on goldandblack.com. You can become a member of the most vibrant community, Knucklehead Central. It doesn't get any more vibrant than that. A lot of information that gets passed from our own subscribers. Some great insight into things, and we try to talk to them as much as possible. And it's a great way to do that. So have a great holiday weekend. We'll be back next week. We're going to get into a little more NIL talk once the house settlement is completed. Mike Carmen will join us, and probably Brian Neubert too, that cover that as close as anything. And we'll look forward to that. So have a great weekend, everybody. Happy holidays for those of you that are celebrating that. And spring is here, and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks so much.